Welcome everybody to a series on the Jewish approach to astrology and the meaning of the stars. We all have, at one point or another, known somebody who likes to glance at their horoscope in the newspaper, but what is exactly the Jewish approach to astrology? The influence of the stars. So first, let's just clarify that there are two different things. There's astronomy and astrology. Astronomy is a natural science that deals with the study of the celestial objects, of the planets, the stars, how they interact with each other, what they do, where they go. But astrology is more of a study, not officially a study, but of the spirit or the meaning of those celestial objects. What energy do they carry? In Jewish tradition, there happens to be a tremendous wealth of knowledge with both astronomy and astrology. The Jewish sages say in the Talmud, in the Gemara and Harios, that a certain star rises every 70 years and leads the sailors astray. I've seen recently many articles that say that this is a reference to Halley's Comet. Halley didn't discover it until the 1700s or whatever, but the sages already back then were recognizing Halley's Comet. Additionally, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Gamliel says that he inherited a tradition about the lunar cycle. He says, I've received a tradition from my father that the moon will renew itself no sooner than 29 and a half days, 2/3 of an hour, and 73 parts of an hour. Now the Rambam, Maimonides, he codifies exactly how much time is in an hour, and if you were to make it into a decimal, it would work out to 29.53059 days. Recently, astronomers, through very sophisticated tools, bouncing a laser beam off a glass prism that was placed on the moon by American astronauts, and using that in conjunction with heavy-duty telescopes hooked up to atomic clocks, they were able to calculate very recently the exact lunar cycle. What did it work out to be? Exactly what Rabbi Gamliel said over 2,000 years ago. Last but not least, not of many examples, but of the example that we're going to talk about tonight, is the number of stars in the universe. The Gemara in Brachos says something very interesting. It says that the Jewish people had been complaining that God had forsaken them, and to which God responded, my children, my daughter, I've set 12 constellations in the sky for you. And for each constellation, I've given it 30 hosts. And every host, I've given 30 legions. And for every legion, I've given 30 cohorts. And for every cohort, I've given 30 groups. And for every group, I've given 30 camps. And for every camp, I've suspended 365,000 of myriads of stars corresponding to the days of the solar year. And all of them, all these celestial objects, all these stars, I've created for your sake. So what's the total there? You start with the 12 constellations times 30 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 times 365,000 times 10,000. And you get a number just above 10 to the 18th power, which is right around where contemporary astronomers say that the number of stars in the universe. Take it a step further, it's an interesting idea, is that the sages already knew clearly that the distribution of stars in the universe was not even or random. They were grouped together. There was billions of stars in one group. Today we call that a galaxy. Those galaxies are in turn clustered into groups. Astronomers call that galactic clusters. And that those galactic clusters, those mega groups of stars, are in turn grouped into mega groups, which we call today superclusters. Furthermore, the idea of a galactic cluster or supercluster, knowing that such things even existed, that the stars were grouped in such a way, was only made possible very recently with very sophisticated telescopes. Last but not least, something interesting to think about is that the Talmud says very clearly that the number of the number of galaxies in a cluster is 30, which astronomers today happen to say that our local cluster has 30 galaxies in it. It's notable that the Talmud over there says that all these stars, everything, all the stars, all the celestial objects were created for your sake. We've learned that in the past. We've talked about in the past that everything, the entire universe, is a backdrop for God's ultimate goal of making the world into a dwelling place. Everything was created for us, human beings, to use our free will. And there's always something, everything that was created, there's always some sort of benefit that it has for us. It's always something connected always to us. So how are the stars connected with us? What's the Jewish approach to astrology? So astrology, in general, used to be the only way that mankind studied the stars. With the scientific revolution, and figures like Newton and Galileo, Kepler and Copernicus, the scientific community severed its ties with astrology. Today, science will dismiss astrology as a bit of a pseudoscience, as not real. But the truth is that many people still harbor some vestige of belief in the influence of the stars and the planets. Most notably, perhaps most influentially as well in recent times, it's known that Nancy Reagan, President Reagan's wife, frequently consulted with an astrologer, and many of those astrological readings were used to formulate the scheduling of the president's meetings and different decisions. So when the public found out about that, many people were quick to ridicule her. But on the other hand, there was a silent majority of a certain acknowledgement that maybe it's not such a bad idea. So what's the Jewish approach? The stars have meaning? Historically, ancient Egypt, ancient Babylon, and Persia saw astrology as essential for providing guidance. In the biblical text, if you read the biblical text, the Torah makes no mention of astrology. When Abraham confronts famine, he doesn't seek an astrologer. When Rivka's twins are fighting in her womb, she doesn't look at her star chart. And when Jacob is given the wrong wife, he doesn't call up Psychic Network. Later on in the prophets, they knew the practices of the stargazers and they scoffed at them. The Talmud, in fact, elaborates that in the biblical narrative, there are instances of astrology, but those astrological predictions were off. Most notably, for example, we just finished the holiday of Passover. Now, many of us know that the beginning of the book of Exodus, there's a very famous account that Pharaoh decided he was going to start throwing the babies, the Jewish boys, into the Nile. The Talmud explains what's the reason for that. It says that the astrologers of Pharaoh's astrologers, said that the Redeemer of the Jewish people would be born and his downfall would come through the water. So Pharaoh's conclusion was, okay, let's take all the boys, and throw them into the Nile. In fact, at the beginning, the Egyptian boys were also thrown into the Nile because Pharaoh wasn't sure initially if the Redeemer of Israel was going to be an Egyptian or a Jew. So, was the astrological prediction correct? Well, sort of. We know what was the reason. What was Moses' downfall? Why was Moses not allowed to enter into the land of Israel? Anyone? Yeah? Yeah. The reason is because when Jewish people were in the desert, there was a point where God instructed Moses to speak to a rock, and that would provide the Jewish people with water. Now Moses, for whatever reason, didn't do it in the correct way, the way that he was specifically instructed, got frustrated, so to speak, and hit the rock instead, and out came the water. So it was through that God responded to him, since you didn't sanctify my name in front of the Jewish people, you will not be the leader who leads the Jewish people into the land of Israel. Joshua will be. So Moses' downfall did come through the water. The Redeemer of the Jews, the one who brought the Jews out of Egypt, did come through the water. But again, the astrological prediction was so vague from the astrologers that we see what the outcome was. In the Talmud, astrology is called istagninus or astrologia. Sometimes the Talmud seems to side with it, that it does have meaning, that the signs and the energies of the days of the week do have meaning. At other times it seems to reject it. On the one hand, Abraham and his descendants, all of us Jews, are said to be not subjugated to the rule of the stars. But on the other hand, we're told in the Talmud that Abraham's blessing, when God blesses Abraham bachol, it says that is a blessing of astrology, stagninus, that he had great astrology, that even the noblemen from around would consult Abraham to get their astrology read. Later commentaries after the Talmud, Rab Savdi Gaon, he wrote a commentary to Sefer Yetzirah, which was based heavily on astrological principles. The Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, many other Jewish sages, the early Jewish sages, wrote extensively on the topic of astrology. The only one who really seemed to have difficulty was the Rambam, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. The Zohar and the Kabbalists accepted astrology as true, as did later sages, including the Ramchal. So sometimes it's praised, and sometimes it's scoffed. What aspects of astrology are true? Because clearly there is some sort of truth to this. What aspects are true? And how does this whole astrology thing work? Find out next time.